I'm a Lakers fan. I've been a Lakers fan since the late '90s into the early 2000s. It's just who I am. I was Bulls, Chicago Bulls first, Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls first, and then Kobe Bryant and the Lakers second. And that's just what it's been. I've just been rocking with them ever since then. So I'm a true fan, and I do like LeBron, of course. I'm a big fan of LeBron. Individually, I'm a big fan of. I've been a fan of Russ in the past. Individually, I like AD. I respect I respect his talent and his ability, especially when he's healthy, right? So you got all of that. I have to admit that Laker Nation, my fellow Lakers fans, they can be very delusional at times and very spoiled and unrealistic at times. And I try not to be like that. Of course, I have my fun when I'm watching the games and I'm really into it and I get emotionally invested. I have my fun, but at the end of the day, once that emotion has kind of gone down a bit and I've had time to just kind of collect myself, I try to keep it objective to some degree when I'm talking about my Lakers, when I'm talking about Russ, when I'm talking about anybody on that squad or the organization as a whole. But I'm telling you, we can be delusional sometimes, because if you think back to it, right? Here's when I really started to kind of question the organization, question management and some of their decisions. It wasn't when they when they picked Kobe over Shaq. That made sense to me. It wasn't that time, but it was more so when they decided back in like 2012, 2013 season, when they decided to bring Dwight Howard over from Orlando and Steve Nash with Kobe. I like when they were. There was a point in time, I can't remember the year, but it was a point in time where they were trying to acquire Chris Paul. I would have loved that move if the commissioner at the time would have actually let that, would have actually allowed us to acquire CP3. I would kind of never forgive that, right? Because I still remember that. I remember how annoyed I was by the fact that trade or that acquisition got blocked back then. I forgot which year. So that was going to be a good. If that would have happened, that would have been a good decision on the part of the Lakers organization. But when I think about when they brought Dwight Howard over and Steve Nash and just how that was a train wreck, and then Kobe Bryant being the late great Kobe being the fierce competitor that he is, it was unfortunate to see what happened to him. He was playing playoff type of basketball during the regular season because he really wanted them to make the playoffs to have a shot to compete for a title, and it ended up resulting in him, tearing his Achilles, and he was just never the same. So I started to kind of have my doubts with the organization and their decision making, just from a management standpoint, around that time. I was okay. Listen, I was cool with some of the guys they acquired, like in the draft or whatever the case may be. These young guys, like when the Lakers had a very young squad, and we weren't good, right? But we were just kind of exciting to watch because it was like any given night, they might put together a good game collectively and get a W. But it was very youthful basketball, up-tempo basketball. And we really had some talented guys on the squad. When you're thinking about guys like Brandon Ingram, and when you're thinking about Kuzma and Josh Hart, and when we had Lonzo and just guys like that, we had some young talent, and it was fun to watch on a lot of nights. Now, but here's the problem. At that time, you could tell they were in a rebuilding stage, trying to figure some things out, trying to see if they could develop these guys so that they could be able to make a big trade like they did with the Anthony Davis acquisition, right? Which, if you really go and dissect that, it led to a championship. But AD has not been himself. With all of the injuries, he just hasn't been available. He's not the AD that we remember from New Orleans, just because he's dealt with a lot of injuries, unfortunately, and just has not really been as available. And then of course you're gonna take some sort of a back seat or have to make some serious adjustments when you're playing with a guy like a LeBron James, who he's like a unicorn. He's a guy who can do so many different things on the basketball court, but he really needs the basketball in his hands a lot of the time, I think, to be his most effective. So you're dealing with that. But the problem with Laker Nation sometimes is that impatient. I know, and then not even. I'm not just gonna put it on Laker Nation, but even the management. This whole idea of getting in front of the camera and continuously feeding this narrative that, yeah, it's unacceptable for us to have a down season. It's unacceptable for us to not be in the finals and not be able to be in a position to compete for a championship. I mean, that all sounds good. It sounds like some Marvel superhero type of talk. But at the end of the day, listen, it's not that simple. You have to put together a squad that makes sense. And then you have to give that squad time to learn each other and to gel and develop a chemistry. And really, work their habits, as Coach Darvin Ham would say, right? Work your habits. You gotta give them that opportunity to go out there and then try to figure it out and make it work. I mean, you can look at any team that's won a chip and it's been successful. The Golden State Warriors, when they were under Mark Jackson, they weren't championship ready, but that work was very key in them getting to where they are now. When you go and look at the San Antonio Spurs, they weren't championship ready right when all of those guys got together, Tony Parker and Ginobili and Tim Duncan. Same thing with LeBron. He didn't win a title in his first stint with Cleveland. He didn't win a title in his first season with Miami. So at the end of the day, the management has to do their job in putting together a team that makes sense. But when you look at this team that's currently constructed, me and my boy Briscoe were talking about this last night. It just doesn't make sense. And yes, maybe this was the best they can do this particular offseason. But when you really think about it, you gave up a lot of young talent. And I believe they gave up some draft picks to acquire AD. Okay? In return, you do end up getting a championship, but it's been nothing since then. It's been horrendous since then. Since that championship that we got in the bubble. It has been bad since then. And even then I had issues with the rotations and the flow of the offense and the lack of shooting. Even then. The difference was we had a great defensive team and we had a lot of size on the team, so we were a great rebounding team. And at that time, AD had a phenomenal season and LeBron was doing his thing. So it made more sense at that point. This offseason, the best thing they did was they got younger, but you still have much of the same. No shooters. As a collective, we are just not a good shooting team. And even the defense, I mean, maybe in the first half of the game against Golden State last night, it was somewhat impressive, but I just also feel like Golden State was just missing a lot of looks that they would normally hit. Trading away, three or four guys involved in that trade for us, that just didn't make sense. And like I said, you got to put that on management. And then also, if it's true that LeBron really wanted him, I got to also put that on LeBron. He's a very high, LeBron's a very high IQ basketball player. So I'm kind of surprised that he would think that would be a situation that would work, even if you have love for Russ and respect what he's done. It just never made sense from the very beginning. I said this. It never made sense from the very beginning. And I'm still a fan of Russ. I will always be a fan of him on and off the basketball court, but it just didn't make sense. So you essentially look at the situation that you're in now. Now, yes, you're a younger team. Might end up being a better defensive team this season. Maybe Coach Ham is a better coach than Frank Vogel. But at the end of the day, the team is still oddly constructed. And like I said, maybe they did the best they could this offseason. Maybe they'll try to do something before the trade deadline. But the team is oddly constructed. And I watched them last night, not playing with a lot of tempo. I'm like, that's okay. So we're going to just run this similar style half-court offense as to what I saw last season that looks stagnant at times. Russ, LeBron, and AD together is just not not a fit, even though I thought that LeBron had some great moments last night. Of course, AD had some great moments. Russ had some good moments too. But it just seemed, when it comes to Russ being out there with LeBron in particular, it just seemed very it's individual. It just doesn't seem like a flow collectively with those guys. Now, I think that sometimes when Russ is out there with AD, it looks better. And obviously, we know about the chemistry that LeBron and AD had. But those three together, it just doesn't make sense. And I was watching some coverage today, and some of these commentators were making some good points, just in terms of you're asking Russ. And this is another, I just don't understand why LeBron would have wanted to bring them there, because LeBron is a ball dominant guy, and he really is the best point guard on that team. I know he's 6'8", 240, 250, whatever, but he's really the best point guard on that team. And to put the ball in Russ's hands, and for LeBron to be focused on playing off the ball, he's just not that type of point guard. If it was CP3, it's a whole different ball game. But he was a better fit with Dennis Schroeder a couple of years ago. So it just doesn't make sense. He was a better fit with Rondo when they won the championship. It's like essentially what you're asking Russell Westbrook to do is something that he's never had to do before in his career. It's the same thing I used to say about this craziness with these teams wanting Melo to all of a sudden become a spot-up three-point shooter in the corner, when his whole career he was give me the basketball, move, I'm gonna go ISO, and he was one of the greatest that I've ever seen in terms of that style of basketball.